Yeah, so I'm just. Oh, this is pretty cool. Yeah, so I'm chilling. Just working on. I probably have to work on citations, I think. I think this paper's pretty good overall. Um, yeah. Yo, what's up, Mr. JQ 2025? Yeah, I haven't streamed in many years. Yeah, I'm about to graduate college. That's kind of what I'm working on right now. I'm just like working on one of my finals and stuff like that. How about you? How have you been? Yeah, no, I definitely remember Killmax. You're my boy. You know how it is. I gotta. Oh my god. Oh my god, bro. Dude, this is crazy. It's crazy that, like, oh my god, I would stream so much and you're like the only person that, like, ever watched me. Yo, Loki, like, yo, Loki, I think I have your Discord, right? I'm gonna, I'm gonna send you my Instagram or something. You could follow me, man. Cause you were like, I don't even know, like, and you found me like just now is crazy. I'll just like, fucking, I don't even know. I'll just type it in the chat. Yeah, but man, follow me on Instagram, cause like, oh word, yeah, message me. Cause I definitely have your Instagram, cause we talked one time. But yeah, you should follow me. And what have you been up to though? Oh, there you go. I mean, you can see everything I'm typing, so it doesn't even matter. Oh, it's not even. Yeah, Miles Miles .sat on Instagram. You should follow me. I'll hit you up for sure. Yeah, so basically, I don't know, just for context, I'm working on this paper for my final, and I've kind of been working on it for a year now. And it came from research I was doing with one of the professors in my department. And basically, it's about this concept, epistemic injustice in psychiatry, which I think is super interesting. Um, I think it's a cool topic. It's not letting me send it, but yeah, no, I mean, I'm about to graduate. I'm just gonna type my Instagram in the chat. You should follow me, cause like, dude, like, it's crazy how like, um, dude, it's just crazy like how you've like always watched me and like how I haven't streamed in like so many years just because like, fucking, I don't even know, cause I've been so busy and like I don't know. There was always something like embarrassing about streaming, I guess. Um, you know, like people would make fun of me and shit, but I've gotten to a point where I'm like enough of an adult to like do things myself and like kind of uh I don't know, kind of like be able to be authentic, my authentic self. I've been reading. I don't know if anyone in the chat though, two people, which I think one of them is me. I don't know if you've ever read like existentialism or stuff, but like existentialism is It's all about freedom, and it's all about like being authentic and your freedom to choose, right? And by choosing for yourself, you're choosing for all of man and making a value judgment. I just think it's super interesting, like how we sometimes let other people make the choices for us, like choosing what we do and how we act. When I think we need to reclaim our freedom, and we almost have a responsibility to do our freedom, to reclaim our freedom and exercise our freedom. Actually, I wrote another paper on that, which is really interesting. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, my parents were always supportive of like streaming and stuff, but definitely like in other aspects of life, they've been very like restrictive of my freedom. Just in that like, yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know. But this is a paper I recently wrote on existentialism, which I think is really interesting. It was my senior capstone. Um, and I'm a big fan of it. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, I'll just, like, low-key just read it right now, honestly, because I just need to, like, um, oh, I got it, word. I followed you back. Um, yeah, I'll just read it out loud, because honestly, it'll help me, because I'm trying to make this paper really good, and maybe I want to publish it one day. I don't even know, but yeah. Oh, thank you, Jaybird. Um, what's up? How are you? I'm about to start. I'm just gonna read my paper that I'm writing, and if any of you have any comments, let me know. I guess like even if you've never like read philosophy, just like anything you might be confused about, I want to make it as clear as possible. Just like whenever, just you can stop me and whatever. So basically, the title is Systematic Inclusion as a Foil to Testimonial Injustice in Psychiatry. It's a little wordy, but the notion of epistemic injustice has steadily gained traction as a crucial framework for understanding how marginalized groups and individuals are wronged, not merely at a social or political level, but an epistemic level. I'm 21, almost 22, almost 22. How about you? But at an epistemic level. Originally developed by Miranda Fricker in her book Epistemic Injustice, Power and the Ethics of Knowing, this notion refers to how harm is done to individuals in their capacity as epistemic agents. So basically, like an epistemic agent is just like a thinking person. So like epistemology and philosophy, this is not in the essay, this is just kind of qualifications. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, right? And it's, yeah. I do remember us being very similar in age. But epistemology is like the study of knowledge, and it kind of deals with like how we know things, and generally like this like epistemic injustice, as I say in the first sentence, talks about how marginalized groups are wronged at an epistemic level, so as at the level of a thinker and a speaker and a knower, right? And I elaborate on this further in the paper. Nowhere is this problem of epistemic injustice more prevalent than in psychiatry. This paper focuses solely on testimonial injustice, which is the main form of epistemic injustice where a speaker's credibility is unjustly deflated due to prejudice. Drawing from the current canon of works on epistemic injustice in psychiatry, I will show how this notion is caused and where it is represented within psychiatry. Finally, I will posit that combating testimonial injustice in psychiatry requires the systematic inclusion of mad individuals and perspectives in education. I want to actually move individuals right here. That's a good catch from me. So there's a footnote there, perspectives in education, entertainment, and medicine. There's a footnote there because which says, for this paper, I will refer to all psychiatric patients as mad individuals. This is to directly coincide with the current paradigm and the current usage of the term within MAD studies. And then I cite an example where a paper where they talk about how basically, no, I just moved it. It's still right here. but basically they talk about how they're kind of reclaiming the word mad for the Mad Pride movement and for mad studies. So it's like a politically correct term. It's not like an archaic word. And this is where the bulk of the essay starts. Yeah, to understand epistemic injustice in psychiatry and how its testimonial form can be combated, one must first understand what epistemic injustice is. Fricker developed two main forms of epistemic injustice, those being testimonial injustice and hermeneutical injustice. Fricker believes testimonial injustice occurs when, quote, prejudice causes a hearer to give a deflated level of credibility to a speaker's word, and hermeneutical injustice occurs at a prior stage when a gap in collective interpretive resources puts someone at an unfair disadvantage when it comes to making sense of their social experiences. Later papers have fleshed out the definition of testimonial injustice by stating that it is a harm done to a person in her capacity as an epistemic subject, a knower, a reasoner, a questioner, by undermining her capacity to engage in epistemic practices such as giving knowledge to others, which is testimony, or making sense of one's experience. And that's from Crichton. This definition can be simplified by saying that testimonial injustice is an injustice done to a subject by a hearer when said hearer does not take all relevant epistemic facts into account given the subject's social status. I think I should change here to given preconceived biases. When said here does not take all relevant given about the speaker. Yeah, I mean, I've read this, due to preconceived biases. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've been going through this a bunch. And yeah, because I've been like, I started it a year ago, then kind of stopped. And then I kind of had a final that I was working on for my epistemology class, and I was like, well, I can just finally finish this paper, and I did. So this often occurs when someone in a position of power is making a decision and neglects the testimony of someone who has relevant epistemic facts due to their social. What the fuck? This often occurs. I'm gonna highlight or comment because I'm probably gonna delete this sentence because I just don't think it makes any sense. Fricker calls this phenomena a prejudice in the economy of credibility, as testimonial injustice entails that a hearer has prejudicial notions which lower the credibility of the knower. One paradigmatic example of testimonial injustice is provided us by Fricker, that being the case of a police officer not believing a suspect because of their race. In this case, the officer is a hearer, and because of their prejudices against the subject, the knower, the suspect's credibility is deflated. Furthermore, any attempt at resolving testimonial injustice must entail a depletion of prejudice in hearers and an inflation of credibility within relevant knowers. For psychiatry, this depletion and inflation can only succeed if one understands what causes epistemic injustice and how it presents. This is actually really helpful, reading through this out loud. And how it presents. Contributory conditions to prejudice. In a 2022 paper entitled Epistemic Injustice in Psychiatric Research and Practice, Ian James Kidd, Lucienne Spencer, and Javi Carrel argued that any attempt at studying epistemic injustice must require an etiology of those injustices. I take the phrase etiology of epistemic injustice to simply refer to a condition or set of conditions that cause epistemic injustice. This etiology was provided in an earlier paper by Paul Crichton, Javi Carrel, and Ian James Kidd, entitled Epistemic Injustice in Psychiatry. And I also will say there's like 30 papers named with this exact same name, or else I would have named my paper that, This paper provided such an etiology by distinguishing two types of contributory conditions to epistemic injustice, those being specific and global contributory conditions. And I have a footnote. It is important to note that each individual conditions are, in and of themselves, both necessary and sufficient conditions for epistemic injustice. No, please, like, if you have any questions or something you don't understand, let me know, because that'll be helpful for me to understand what is maybe unclear or needs more explanation. So, like, anything, all perspectives are equally valid. I don't want to deflate, your credibility based on preconceived notions or anything, as it is only a result. Okay, I was here. Specific conditions are factors that only apply to an individual with a specific condition. An example of this condition can be seen by looking at narcissists and how people may believe that a narcissist is always lying by virtue of their narcissism. In this case, if a narcissist tells a person they are going to therapy, the person may not believe the narcissist by virtue of let's just say, like, their previously held stigma about narcissism. Yeah, in short, a hearer may never believe a knower, the narcissist, due to their beliefs prejudices about the knower. Narcissists always lie. Yeah, thanks, man. You too, man. Be well, Jaybird. Narcissists always lie. This epistemic stigma is a core example of specific contributory conditions causing epistemic injustice, as it is only a result of that individual's specific condition. Global contributory conditions to epistemic injustice are conditions that, when fulfilled, affect any person living with a psychiatric disorder. Crichton et al. Lists 3 separate global conditions for epistemic injustice in psychiatry. These are 1, problems associated with and partly caused by the mental disorder. 2, the higher value placed by health professionals on hard or objective evidence compared to patient reports. Is this cited correctly? Yeah, it's cited correctly. I'll just put here soft evidence, and basically the brackets mean that it's not in the original text, but it's that's what it's referring to. And 3, the entrenched negative stereotype associated with mental disorder. While these conditions serve as an etiology for epistemic injustice and thus testimonial injustice, in psychiatry there is a need for further explanation of what they are and how they cause testimonial injustice. The first conditions relates to issues that are direct or partial effects of a mental disorder. This needs to be qualified. I need to change this. That are caused by a mental disorder. Crichton et al. Argue that these issues are not the actual symptoms of the disorder, but rather disadvantages caused by mental disorders and their symptoms. Some of these disadvantages include drug addiction, social isolation, and unemployment. Okay. Crichton et al. Continue to state that these disadvantages caused by mental illness lead to an assignment of blame on the mad individual. More specifically, the layman will often say that these issues, social isolation, unemployment, drug addiction, etc., are the fault of the mentally ill individual. Testimonial injustice is a direct result of this. We can see this by imagining a near possible world such that a hearer is discussing cutting mental health services for drug addicts. In this same possible world, it is not radical to imagine that same hearer arguing to cut services It's not radical to imagine that here. We ought to cut those services. It is not radical to imagine, in the same possible world, it is not radical to imagine that not radical to imagine that same hearer arguing that we ought to cut those services because drug addiction is the fault of the addict and not mental illness, even in light of possible defeating testimony. This sucks. I'm gonna fucking highlight this because I need to change that. In this case, testimonial injustice is clearly present as the hearer, the person deciding, is not taking all relevant facts into account. Drug addiction as a result of mental illness due to their preconceived notion of the knower, the drug addict being at fault for their addiction. Okay. The second condition, does that make sense? For whoever's watching, do you guys understand that condition? It's basically like the assignment of blame. The problem is like the assignment of blame for like problems kind of caused by mental illness. So like drug addiction might be caused by mental illness as I don't even know, like it as like people fucking like, so drug addiction is caused by mental illness because people like with or let's just go to unemployment. Actually, let's use unemployment. So like people with mental illnesses might have trouble keeping jobs due to due to their ongoing mental health problems. Like schizophrenic people might not be able to be quiet because they're constantly hearing things and maybe responding, and that might affect their job performance, right? And basically this condition relates to how we or how the layman might blame that person and say it's your fault for not being able to be employed, when really it's an effect of their mental disorder. And I think, so we can move on. The second condition relates to how health professionals value evidence. In this case, Crichton et al. Writes about how doctors often value hard over soft evidence. We can take hard evidence to refer to that evidence which is derived from empirical observation. This evidence is often considered objective. On the other hand, we can understand soft evidence I think, I don't blame someone dealing with addiction, right, at all. I think a lot of people do. They say it's your fault for being addicted to drugs, when really the drugs might really be a way of escaping struggles they find with their mental illness. So I agree with that. I mean, I struggle with my own vices, I can't stop fucking smoking weed and hitting my vape and, doing other shit, I guess. Yeah, No, exactly. And I think a lot of these issues, like unemployment, like social isolation, like drug addiction, are often caused by mental illness, right? And the testimonial injustice is when people don't believe that when they're saying it was caused by the mental illness, because they simply have these preconceived notions that's about, these people, that's like, oh, it's your fault. It's your fault nobody talks to you. When in reality, it's because they have whatever condition. Yeah, no, like I'll give you they have whatever. I'll give you an example. Like I have ADHD, right? And ADHD makes you be like constantly seek dopamine, right? I need to be seeking dopamine all the time, and I use too much weed because like I'm constantly seeking the dopamine and I kind of can't stop it. I'm really trying to quit. I haven't smoked in like 2 days, which is I think good, but I'll probably smoke tonight to be honest. Because it is Thirsty Thursday. But like yeah, like it's because like my brain like desires this constant dopamine boost, but really that's because of my ADHD. But yeah, it's not like huge. It's not a huge issue. I just like would rather not be frying my brain all the time. And I think that's like, I feel like I'm getting like, it is Thirsty Thursday for sure. And we're adults now, we can drink legally. I love going to bars. Jeez, it's gonna be so fucking lit. Yeah, but okay, I'll continue. Is often considered objective. On the other hand, we can understand soft evidence as evidence derived from patient testimony. This evidence is often considered subjective. Crichton et al. Point out that despite hard evidence seeming objective, much of it requires interpretation. I'll leave a comment that just says like relevancy. To that, because I don't know how relevant that is. To see how this value system causes testimony, just we can look at depression patients. Which in this case, a patient might say they experience a 2-week bout with depression for the first time is now feeling a bit better. A clinician might respond by telling them they have a chemical imbalance in their brain, and the best way to combat it is by taking antidepressants that target, minorly relevant, that target the chemical imbalance. In this case, the soft evidence, the patient's initial testimony might indicate a need for a more natural, unmedicated recovery. Instead, the doctor is ignoring the testimony of the patient, the soft evidence that, they've only had it for 2 weeks and they're kind of feeling better, and is instead prescribing medication that is believed to be backed by hard evidence. Furthermore, the depressed person's credibility is deflated, showing how the value of hard over soft evidence can lead to testimonial injustice in psychiatry. I just think that this is like not a great example, because like I just don't like know if that would really happen. But I also don't know that it wouldn't happen. A lot of this shit's really corrupt right now. That's like a lot of some of the research I was doing, and kind of like I realized like how corrupt a lot of these institutions are. But that's kind of what this paper is aiming to kind of ameliorate here. So the third global contributory condition to epistemic injustice is entrenched negative stereotypes. This can appear as the belief that mad individuals are lazy, dishonest, violent, and irrational. Yeah, no, exactly. No, exactly. You have all this evidence, but yet you don't believe their testimony because of your preconceived notions. Here, the preconceived notions might be like that they have so much to be happy for, but they're saying I'm so sad, and that might not be as much what would happen in the medical field, but definitely like with friends, it's like you're not depressed. You have so like everything's going on like within your social life. That's like definitely an area where testimonial injustice, at least in a social sphere, is super present. I don't know I've never heard of grape cases. Oh, yeah, no. Yes, very true. It is a big issue with, yeah. It's, it, it took me a minute, but yeah, no, 100% that a lot, testimonial injustice is like super prevalent there. So much in just in general in law and in the legal sphere, it's a real problem, especially yeah, no, exactly, especially with like one of the biggest issues, and I do talk about it earlier, is like the race thing with race, because it's so often do like I answered for a public defender's office, and like I was seeing like so often how like the testimony of like individual defendants are being like deflated just because of someone like, you know, being racist, you know, the judge being racist or the prosecutor being racist. Their testimony isn't, the facts aren't being taken into account. And I think it's yeah, and I think a lot of this can apply to other spheres, especially my solution that I come up with later. But yeah, I'm just going to continue. So the third is entrenched negative stereotypes. This can appear as the belief that mad individuals are lazy, dishonest, violent, or irrational. While this may seem identical to the first condition, it is different. The first condition relates to actually the problems faced by the mad individual as a result of their mental illness, while this condition relates to the preconceived biases against those people, i.e. someone believes the narcissist can never tell the truth. A mad individual, oh, it looks like someone's looking at it. I've sent it to like 1 million people, so hopefully someone's going to be leave comments. Believes a mad individual can never, we'll just say like, accurately portray reality. You know, I mean, that sounds good enough. As well, one might think that this is the same as specific contributory conditions. As well, one might, yeah. This global condition, however, differs from the specific conditions in that it does not relate to prejudice about an individual condition, but rather prejudices held about mad individuals altogether. For instance, one might think that all mad people are unintelligent. By thinking this, if a mad individual tries to tell you a fun fact, one might immediately deflate their credibility simply by virtue of having that entrenched negative stereotype that they are unintelligent. Thus, entrenched negative stereotypes of mad individuals directly leads to testimonial injustice in psychiatry. All of these conditions together make apparent the presence of testimonial injustice in psychiatry. Each global condition leads to a depletion in credibility on behalf of the knower. Thank you. I appreciate that. On behalf of the knower. The first condition does through blaming an individual for problems caused by the mental disorder. The second does so by disregarding testimony in favor of perceptual observation. And the third through overall prejudice against the speaker. As well, specific contributory conditions deplete the credibility through the pre-held prejudice about specific illnesses. Yeah. Furthermore, any attempt at ameliorating testimonial injustice in psychiatry must deplete and mitigate the occurrence of these contributory conditions. So this next section is just a little summary, is about a past attempt, but okay. Yeah, this section is about a past attempt that was made at fixing. Oh my god, I have 5 viewers? That's like hella. Yeah, guys, I got 5 whole viewers. Having established the presence and causes of testimonial injustice in psychiatry, we can now look at a solution posed by Creighton. The solution they proposed was the introduction of mandatory Schwartz rounds, not only in medical training but also in clinical practice. These Schwartz rounds consist of, quote, regular interpersonal dynamic meetings with members of a multidisciplinary team, which create a forum for discussing emotional contacts with patients, and hope to allow health professionals to focus on the existential, ethical, and personal aspects of a medical case. Yeah, no, I mean, this is like, so this is kind of in one of the most, like, popular, I guess, paradigms in philosophy right now, which is like epistemic injustice, and more specifically epistemic injustice in psychiatry, which is like a very it's very dominant, and it's a very, like, people are writing about it all the time. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a philosophy major. I'm about to graduate with a degree in philosophy. But I've been published in works, like acknowledged in published works in very prestigious journals on hermeneutical injustice, which is a different form of epistemic injustice. When here I'm focusing on testimonial injustice. But in like 5 days I'm gonna have a degree in philosophy. So, yeah. The solution they proposed was the introduction of mandatory Schwartz rounds, not only in medical training but also in clinical practice. These Schwartz rounds, I will also say that this is what's called philosophy of psychiatry, which is basically philosophy talking about psychiatry. So what philosophy is, kind of just like as a basic idea, is like concept creation and concept definition. So, oh, thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I got plans for next year. I'm going to go to law school. So, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to law school next year. I'm hoping to somehow, like, find a way to connect my philosophical interests with my legal interests. So, I'm hoping, and I think this is a really good paper so far. This is one of the best I've written. So, yeah, if you have any points of confusion, please feel free to interrupt, or you want clarification. Like, anything helps. Each opinion, each question there's no bad questions. But if you ask a bad question, I'll tell you it's a bad question, My mom was asking some bad questions when I sent it to her. These Schwartz rounds consist of, and hope to allow to focus on existential, ethical, and personal aspects of a medical case. Essentially, Schwartz rounds force doctors to talk to patients and then critically consider patient testimony. This critical consideration fosters an environment where medical decisions are more of a collaboration between the patient and the doctor, as opposed to just the doctor. This thus raises the credibility of the patient through the doctor's mandatory consideration of their perspective. This view, however, has some drawbacks. For starters, the mandatory inclusion of Schwartz rounds only seems to combat 2 out of 3 of the global contributory conditions, those being problems associated with or partly caused by the mental disorder and the value of hard over soft evidence. The first is combated through the doctor's attempt at understanding the patient's perspective, leading to an understanding of how other problems, e.g. drug addiction, might be a result of their mental disorder and not the fault of the individual, rather the fault of the disorder. Value of hard over soft evidence is combated as when doctors collaborate with patients in psychiatric decision-making, they legitimize those perspectives, thus putting soft and hard evidence on more equal footing. More even footing. The Schwartz rounds, however, neglect to combat testimonial injustice by way of entrenched negative stereotypes. Even if doctors are legitimately considering the perspectives of patients, if those same doctors have negative stereotypes about madness, we'll say, then it doesn't matter how much they interact with patients. Entrenched negative stereotypes still persist regardless of how much the doctor tries to understand and consider patient testimony. Schwartz rounds failing to combat entrenched negative stereotypes can even lead to the solution failing to combat the value of soft over hard evidence. For if a doctor has this inherent bias against a patient due to their disorder, that doctor might subconsciously discredit their testimony in favor of hard evidence. So this means that entrenched negative stereotypes held by a doctor can negate the Schwartz-Round's ability to solve the issue of valuing hard over soft evidence. Basically, what it's trying to say is that, like, at face value, the Schwartz-Rounds are able to, like, kind of combat the value of soft over hard evidence, but since they don't combat the entrenched negative stereotypes, they in turn will fail to combat the value of soft over hard evidence. So if the entrenched negative stereotypes wasn't there, they wouldn't have that issue, but they do. So really they don't even account for two of them. Furthermore, this solution fails to account for all three global contributory conditions. And by doing so, it loses its ability for other conditions. What is this talking about? Is it something linked to society or human nature, and what are Schwartz? So basically, I think you kind of missed the first half of the paper where I'm kind of explaining a lot of concepts, but I can give a brief overview for you because I feel like it's not that crazy. So basically, this paper is on what's called testimonial injustice, which is basically where a speaker's credibility is deflated by a hearer, or like a patient's credibility is deflated by their doctor, and their testimony and the facts they're saying aren't fully taken into account due to preconceived notions held by the doctor about the patient, right? And basically, that's testimonial injustice in psychiatry, and there are three different conditions, or really there's four, but there's two main types of conditions that cause it. One being specific, which isn't as relevant right now, the other being global. And there are three types of global conditions, which are basically negative effects of the mental illness, which would be like drug addiction, social isolation, and unemployment. The second would be value of soft over hard evidence, so valuing like a study over the patient's testimony, what the patient is saying. And the third would be entrenched negative stereotypes. So, like, these stereotypes that you believe that mad individuals are, like, bad people or unable to love or whatever, or unintelligent. Those are entrenched negative stereotypes. So, what Schwartz-Rounds are is they're already being done in the UK, but they're proposed to be mandatory in both training and in practice by these philosophers that I cite. And what they are is basically like doctors go around and kind of try to like explain it here. Like the doctors have to have regular interpersonal dynamic meetings with members of a multidisciplinary team, which means they're meeting with other doctors from other disciplines and kind of discuss the emotional aspects of the patient, and it helps them focus on the existential, ethical, and personal aspects of a medical case. And basically, I'm saying that the Schwartz-Rounds don't fully combat it because it only combats 2 out of the 3 global contributory conditions, and because it even misses one, it loses its ability to combat for the other condition. This failed solution shows that any proposal to combat testimonial injustice in psychiatry must interact with and combat all 3 global contributory conditions. Hey, Mike Honcho. How are you doing? Yeah, so I'm so I'm just going through my paper right now for anyone who's wondering. There's kind of a lot, so if you have any questions, let me know, because I can probably answer them pretty quickly, or no, you're all fine. You're all fine. Yeah, I appreciate it. It is very interesting, and it's a really hot topic of discussion right now. And don't please interrupt if you have any questions. I want to make this paper as clear as possible because I really do think, and we're about to get to it. I have a very clever solution, and I'm pretty proud of it. But I think it really does a good job at kind of introducing this problem or this solution to a problem that's talked about a lot, but kind of doesn't have a huge body of posed solutions. W philosophy, exactly. Yeah. So a testimonial injustice in psychiatry doesn't have a lot of solutions posed. It has some yeah, that's chill, man. That's chill. This is just this is testimonial injustice in psychiatry. I'm writing a paper about it. And I've just been kind of going through it. So, if you guys want me to explain, basically the idea is that there's this thing called testimonial injustice, which is, yeah, basically I basically defined it earlier where it's harm done to a capacity as an epistemic subject, which is a knower, a reasoner, a questioner, by undermining her capacity to engage in epistemic practices such as giving knowledge to others, testifying, or making sense of one's own experience. So basically it's deflating the credibility of a speaker based on preconceived notions about that speaker. And essentially there's a lot of this is what's called testimonial injustice, that deflation of credibility. And it's kind of a really big issue in psychiatry, and it's being heavily discussed in philosophy and in psychology and in psychiatry. And it's a hot topic of discussion, and I'm writing my paper on it. And yeah, someone doesn't believe you. Yeah, no, exactly. It's actually really nice to see that you kind of understand what I'm talking about coming from a perspective of someone who's never heard of this before. But this is one of a very, yes, prejudice about the speaker, right? So exactly. So examples in psychiatry would be sorry, there's a really famous example. Sorry, my shit's falling everywhere. There's a really famous example of this, Russian oligarch, right? So basically this guy was kind of I don't know what he had. Maybe he had schizophrenia or he had psychopathy or whatever, but he was in a mental institution in the USSR, and basically he told his doctors, he's yo, my cousin is this Russian oligarch, right? And these doctors were no, he's not. You're crazy. You've been established to be crazy. Obviously, he's not. But guess what? His cousin was a Russian oligarch, right? So because of their preconceived notions about the speaker, which is that he's crazy and that he can't tell the truth and that he has delusions, they don't actually take his testimony into account, right? Despite his testimony actually being true. And that's kind of one of the big issues in psychiatry. So, and I kind of just explained one past attempt, and there are different conditions, but they'll kind of get explained within this next solution. So, and I think my solution is clever and it's pretty novel, so I'm going to get to it right now. So basically I say, Crichton et al. Have the right idea. They hope to combat epistemic injustice, aim to combat through fostering an environment where doctors can understand and empathize with patient perspectives. Unfortunately, these rounds fail to foster said environment if and when doctors have entrenched negative stereotypes. There is a way, however, that these environments can be created. This can be done through a large-scale change of social attitudes towards individuals suffering from mental illness, towards mad individuals. The way to create this change is through the systematic inclusion of mad individuals and their perspectives in spaces traditionally dominated by the neurotypical. And this is what I think is pretty unique, what I just said. And then it continues, there are three main spaces such that when mad perspectives / individuals are included, testimonial injustice in psychiatry can be successfully avoided. The first space needing patient inclusion is education. Here, the patient inclusion would not only is in education. Here, the patient inclusion would not only be present in the education of doctors, but also in elementary and secondary education. Some examples of this possible inclusion could be psychiatric patients speaking at school-wide town halls, classes on mental health/mental illness, and regular exposure to mad individuals. This focus on psychiatric education helps to combat the first global contributory condition, problems associated with and partly caused by the mental disorder. Yeah, no, it is good, but what I'm arguing here is that you need a combination and implementation in all three of these spaces, because, like, which I'll kind of get to, yeah. The focus on psychiatric helps combat problems associated with and partly caused by the mental disorder. Education ameliorates the condition, as when kids are exposed to mad individuals from a young age, they will learn to understand their perspectives. For instance, a schizophrenic person might be a social outcast due to how people look at them when they're in public. That same individual could go to a school and speak about how schizophrenia has impacted them in the social world. This allows children to empathize with the mad individual, thus teaching them not to blame the individual for the problems like social isolation caused and associated with their mental disorder. The second space in need of patient inclusion is entertainment. Some inclusion in entertainment could look like the casting of mad actors in film and television, the inclusion of mad perspectives in journalism, and the creation of media featuring mad perspectives. This inclusion would help combat the third contributory condition of entrenched. Third contributory condition. We'll do a colon there. I don't know. I don't really know anything about psychology, to be honest. I know about philosophy. I think for psychology, at least, you'd probably, like, it's just all reading, you know. I mean, I'm sure there's good YouTube videos, but, like, if you really want to understand, like, an academic subject, you gotta just, like, read books or essays. So with psychology, I mean, I think you would want to, like, at least start with, like, Freud, right? Despite, like, Freud kind of being, like, yeah, this is philosophy of psychiatry, so it's basically philosophy talking about the psychiatric industry. It's philosophy because it's dealing with concept definition and concept creation, so I'm defining these concepts and I'm posing, like, a normative solution, like how things ought to be. By seeing mad individuals, I'm all philosophy, man. All philosophy. Yeah, I also do want to qualify with Freud, because, like, I'm not a psychology person. A lot of my friends are psychology people, but I'm like, Freud is pretty much rejected by, like, all modern psychologists. So, like, I think, like, it's a good start because it kind of, like, invented the field, but it's also just, like, not, like, kind of accepted, you know, by modern psychology. So you might want to, like, I don't know, ask ChatGPT. That's usually, like, pretty helpful. Fuck AI though, you know. By seeing mad individuals perform and report in the same way neurotypical people do, people will learn to accept madness for what it is and eventually dispel preconceived notions associated with madness. As well, by creating media that deals with mad perspectives, people will be able to look past their madness and dispel further dispelling deep-rooted stigma. There you go. To show this, we can look back on the stereotype that all mad individuals are unintelligent. It was a stereotype I mentioned earlier. This stereotype has already been partially dealt with in entertainment. Films like A Beautiful Mind and Rain Man. A Beautiful Mind is about John Nash, who was, like, one of the greatest mathematicians of all time, who had schizophrenia. And Rain Man, I bet a lot of you have seen Rain Man. It's about, like, an autistic person who's, like, also a genius. directly demonstrate how mad individuals are not necessarily unintelligent and how they can even be geniuses. These films show how the inclusion of mad individuals and perspectives within entertainment can directly dispel entrenched negative stereotypes. I think that's pretty straightforward because those movies are examples of how, like, oh, you have this stereotype, but then there are these films that kind of, like, show you that, like, this stereotype is clearly false, you know? And I think so that's the second space. And the last space where patient inclusion must be present is within psychiatric practice. This can look like the Schwartz rounds posed by Crichton, patient inclusion and DSM revision as posed by Onk-Buter, who isn't really mentioned in this paper other than here, but is an important figure in modern day discussion of testimonial injustice in psychiatry. So I kind of had to at least include her to a point, or even a focus on creating mad providers, like doctors with mental illness. This helps prevent the second condition, the value, from being an issue. This is due to practitioners commonly engaging with and considering mad perspectives. As established previously, Schwartz rounds are successfully able to combat this issue through the fostering of an inclusive environment where patients and doctors work in collaboration. When doctors are attempting to look at mental illness through the patient's perspective, they are, in turn, giving patient testimony greater credibility. By considering patient perspectives, the doctor does not immediately disregard their testimony and, in turn, raising the credibility of their self-evidence. I don't know. That's fine. It's like, because it's kind of repetitive, but it's whatever. This shows how patient inclusion in medicine can combat practitioners' value of soft over hard evidence. I mean, that's basically the idea. The rest of the paper is kind of just responding to objections and then concluding. But that's kind of my idea, that these three spaces, if we can kind of implement and include mad perspectives in them, it kind of can dispel, like, preconceived notions. And I make an interesting point in one of the responses to the objections, so I'll continue. Some readers may find this account problematic for two reasons. One, it neglects specific contributory conditions to prejudice, and two, spaces like education and entertainment affect not the hearer, but rather unaffiliated parties, children, and consumers. While these are interesting points of contention, they eventually fall flat with further discussion. The first problem, neglecting specific contributory conditions, is easily accounted for when one considers the inclusion of mad perspectives in these three spaces. Through implementing the proposed systematic inclusion, this is fucking terrible, I think. I mean, the ideas is good, but this is like some of my worst writing, I think. Through implementing the proposed systematic inclusion, we eliminate negative stereotypes associated with specific conditions. This can be seen in the dating show Love on the Spectrum. In this show, people with autism are set up on dates with the hope of finding love, just like any other dating show. Before watching the show, the layman might stereotype consciously or unconsciously people with autism as unlovable or incapable of love. Here, the specific beliefs about people with autism being incapable of love apply only to autistic people. They are specific to that individual condition. Through showing how autistic people desire and are capable of and do love to the same extent that any neurotypical person does, this program directly dispels this specific stereotype. This real-world example shows how the inclusion of mad individuals in traditionally neurotypical spaces like entertainment can directly dispel this specific contributory conditions to prejudice. Okay, so that's kind of responding to specific conditions, which I think are kind of less important, but also I think kind of a lot can get reduced down to it. The second objection is that spaces like entertainment and education affect not the hearer, but rather unaffiliated parties. A proponent of this might argue that the inclusion of mad perspectives in entertainment and education doesn't raise the credibility of the mad individual in the eyes of the doctor, rather it only does so for the child, their consumer. This objection struggles when we consider that this process of inclusion would be a long-term project. While educating today's children would surely not affect today's doctors, it would affect tomorrow's doctors. Through the implementation of perspectives in these three spaces, we will eventually get to a point where all doctors were raised with exposure to mad perspectives in school and in entertainment. Hence, while the solution is not an immediate fix, it serves as a long-term plan to ameliorate testimonial injustice in psychiatry. Testimonial injustice in psychiatry stemmed from deep-rooted prejudice that deflates the credibility of psychiatric patient testimony. This injustice is not random, but has identifiable contributory conditions that serve as its etiology. Despite current solutions such as Schwartz rounds making long strides towards addressing the issue, they ultimately fall short of dismantling all three of the global conditions simultaneously. This paper argued that the best way to combat testimonial injustice in psychiatry is through the systematic inclusion of mad individuals in education, entertainment, and medicine. This inclusion fosters an environment where patient perspectives are not immediately discredited, which in turn helps to create large-scale attitudinal changes. Although this solution is gradual, it can eventually serve as an adequate foil to testimonial injustice in psychiatry. And that's the paper. 12 pages. It's one of the longer papers I've written, or 11 and a half. Here are the sources, if any of you want to read it. Specifically, I didn't talk about this one a lot, but this is probably one of my favorite sources. This is also one I used, I talked about this one a lot, which I think is interesting, and this is a book where if you want to know about epistemic injustice, this is the book. Right, Miranda Fricker created the term in this book. So I think someone's leaving comments. Oh yeah, that's my friend who is a writing tutor at Rutgers. I don't go to Rutgers. I go to Temple. I live in Philly. Philly. And I'm also a writing tutor. But yeah. Philly's awesome. Philly. Yeah, I mean, that's the paper. If anyone has any comments, please let me know. I get it's a lot, especially like maybe if you came like halfway through, or really? You think it's a good solution? Because, like, a lot of people have talked about it. Like, Ankh Buter talked about how it can be fixed through the implementation of patient perspectives in DSM revision. But I think that just doesn't do it, because it's hard to say that we should have, like, non-medical practitioners, like, deciding what a medical condition is. Obviously, we should take their input because they're the ones suffering. But at least that alone, I think, seems problematic. And same with the Schwartz round. So I think people, at least in philosophy of psychiatry right now, tend to focus on, like, when they're thinking about fixes for this issue, they're thinking about fixes in medicine only, right? They're thinking, oh, the way we can combat testimonial injustice in psychiatry is through, like, changes to how medicine is done, right? But really the problem is, in psychiatry, it's more of a societal issue. It's not just a medical issue, right? You can't combat a societal issue just in medicine, right? So to combat the issue within psychiatry, within medicine, you have to look outwards to solutions. You have to combat it at a more holistic social level, right? You have to create this large-scale social change. It doesn't just stop at the medical level, because if you keep it at the medical level, you have to understand that doctors are people too, right? And unless doctors grow up, right? So if they're growing up with these biases don't just go away. Biases persist. And so what we have to do is find a way for our children who are being exposed to madness to help prevent them from ever developing these biases, these prejudices, this wrongful assignment of blame, right? And I think it's something, I don't know, the reason I want to make this good is not because, like I don't want to get a PhD in philosophy, at least maybe when I'm older. I'm really just not good enough at philosophy, to be honest, to get a PhD. I could have gotten a master's, and I probably could have gotten into, like Cambridge for a master's, but not for a PhD, and I don't want to be in $1 million of debt, because and then never make any money my whole life. But the reason I want to make this good is because I really do think it can make like a legitimate contribution to the philosophical canon, right? It can make like a legitimate contribution to how philosophers of psychiatry are interacting with philosophy of psychiatry and with epistemic injustice, right? I really do think this is a really good idea, and I think it's a waste for this to not be good, and like the paper structure or like the language for it not to be good or clear, and then just waste the idea, right? When it could make legitimate contributions to philosophy, I think. I really do believe this. Yeah. And that's kind of it. Loke, hike. Um, yeah. If anyone, we were getting some crazy viewers. We were like averaging like 8 viewers there during that paper. I mean, I could just like literally just like talk about philosophy like all the time. I love philosophy. I could just like, there's one paper I want to write that I haven't ever written, and I'm kind of like, it wouldn't be for a class, it would just be for fun. And because I got into existentialism this semester, and I wrote a paper here about it, but it's kind of like ridiculous a little bit. But basically, I was watching Regular Show really high one night, and I thought like, man, like, dude, my fucking arrow key doesn't even work. What the fuck? No fucking way, bro. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. This is so ass, bro. My fucking arrow key is broken. Yo, what the fuck? Yeah, but basically, I was watching Regular Show one night, really high, and I was like, yo, Regular Show is like a perfect representation of existentialism. Right, because basically the idea in existentialism is that like existence precedes essence. So because there's no God, right? I mean, the whole thing is atheistic existentialism. No like being created us with like a meaning or reason or essence behind our existence. So existence is fundamentally meaningless. It is absurd. It is we're contingent beings, right? And I wrote this paper, and then I watched Regular Show, and I realized that, wait a minute, Regular Show fits all aspects of existentialism. Like, in each episode, things happen for seemingly no reason. Like, they I don't know, like, put the microwave into the wrong outlet, and somehow they're transported into a world. Why? There's no reason why. It just happens. It just is. It's same with the characters are all radically free. I mean, they can do whatever they want. They all create who they are. They define themselves. I mean, Rigby, named himself Trash Boat. That's a radically free decision. So I really think I could write a good paper. And I think this could be a medium to do so. Kind of be like, it can get me motivated to write for my own sake. Like, I really think I could express how Regular I know it's like ridiculous, but like I don't know, I think it's like, I think there's like legitimacy to it. Like, I think it's a good claim, I think it's like a philosophically like yeah, I just think it's super philosophically interested. Yeah, this is just a yeah, my friend who's commenting is just texting me. Yeah, I'm just telling her that there's a footnote explaining what mad individual is. Um, yeah, no, I mean, yeah, there's, uh, yeah. Yeah, I think it's the first footnote, if I'm not correct. If I'm not wrong. Yeah. Do you study philosophy, Gom? And what kind of philosophy do you study, if you do? Because I love philosophy. That's like my whole shtick. I really want to just like get randomly banned for vaping on my fucking YouTube live stream. Um, yeah. I'm trying to explain to my friend to read the footnote. Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm really happy with this paper. I've been like saying it's my magnum opus. Uh, uh, I've been working on it for a year, and I'm submitting it for a different class. I'm submitting it as the final for my epistemology class because my professor said I could. So it's not really the class. We never even talked about epistemic injustice, but I had a whole research. Oh, Morocco. And we study a lot about desire and need and these things. Yeah, I mean that's like, yeah, that's not my favorite type of philosophy. Um, a lot of that, like, yeah, I would say a lot of my interests revolve around like, well, primarily like, um, philosophy of psychiatry, like here, which extends to broader philosophy of science. And then philosophy of language, like Saul Kripke and stuff like that, and existentialism. Now I'm very interested in too. Uh, and yeah, so good luck with high school. Obviously, like high school is, um, high school's difficult, man. Uh, I would say like I really struggled through high school. Like I didn't do very well and shit, and like I never enjoyed any of the classes. I like had a bad GPA and stuff. But then like I got to college, like barely got in. I got recruited for a sport. So it was like, but I quit that after the first year. But then like I fucking, like I just locked. I don't even know. I just like I found something I really loved, which was philosophy, and it really interested me, and I really succeeded, and I got a really good GPA. I won both my senior philosophy awards for excellence in philosophy and for community building, and I did really well in the law school admissions tests, and I'm going to law school next year. So like high school was a struggle for me, and I definitely didn't, wasn't interested in anything I learned, and it's all about finding something you're interested in, and but Morocco is really cool. I've never been to Morocco. A lot of my friends went to Morocco because I studied abroad last semester. I was in Rome, so I never actually got to Morocco, but it was somewhere I wanted to go. My cousin went. I got to Turkey and stuff like that, but never Morocco. But Marrakesh seems really cool. It's like right in the desert. It just seems like a very real place, Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, that's it. I love philosophy. Philosophy's been very good to me. I would recommend it for anyone. Oh yeah, no, I'm sure. I'm sure. What's the Moroccan school system look like? It's a good question. I don't know. It just. Oh, my arrow key's working again. Let's go. Um. Seven to 16. Yeah. Yeah, so it's pretty similar, I think, but I bet there's like a lot more rigor in like the classes and shit. Um, yeah, 17, 16. Dude, what time is it in Morocco? It must be like fucking 4 a.m. or something, right? Something like that. Oh, it's 12:30. I'm stupid, but yeah, it's only 7:30 where I'm at. If any of you like, yeah, if any of you have any specific interests in philosophy, like, I mean, maybe I've worked on it before, and we can talk about it if you want. I do have to go in like 30 minutes because Thirsty Thursday, you know how it is. But like, if you have any like questions, like we can just talk, like keep an open discussion. You know how it is, human nature. Yeah, so like I was talking about this earlier with like the existentialism stuff, but like I would say there at least like humans there is no like meaning behind human existence. Like humans are just like fundamentally free beings, so I would say humans have no nature. There is no nature to humans. We just are, we simply exist, no meaning, no reason, no purpose. That would be a very like existentialist, like Sartrean conception. Thala. I don't know what Thala is. Let's Google that. Thala. Oh. Nope. Let's go to absurdism. Yeah. No, so absurdism is basically just a different word for existentialism, right? Which is like, I mean, I have a whole paper on it, right? So I don't know how much, because absurdism differs, because absurdism, I've read The Stranger many years ago, but I actually wrote my senior capstone on, that's a good question, Agam, I'll get it, on Sartre's Nausea and Sartre's later works, which kind of is, like, absurdism is basically just existential. They're basically the same thing. But basically, like, absurdism, I'll get to you, Gom, after, because that's a good question, and it's a hard question. But it's basically the idea that, like, because there is no God, and this is kind of why I believe this, right? So it kind of answering two questions at once, explaining like absurdism / existentialism and why I believe it, right? It's because, like, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God, right? And I think because there's no God, like, there's really no reason behind why we exist, right? Nobody was like, there's no meaning behind our existence. There was no purpose for us to exist, right? So, I mean, I talk about it here. Like we essentially like there's nothing that comes before our existence. We simply just like happen to exist, right? We're kind of thrust into the world with no like reason, nothing. It just happened. It happened to happen. It was just kind of like, no, that's not at all a consequence that we should die. Because I think one of the consequences is that we're radically free beings, right? And if you like choose to die, you can choose to die. You can choose to kill yourself. But I don't think you have to love. I don't think you have to die. Yeah, and I think we all have our purposes, right? But I think along the lines of the absurdist / the existentialist view, we kind of those purposes, like being here to love, are defined. You're defining your essence by saying I'm here to love. You're defining yourself as someone who is a loving subject. You know, you're a subject who loves. You know, and that's something you define through your free action and your free choices, right? And it's not something that came before existence. You can ask me anything. You freely chose to be someone who loves. I believe this. Yeah. I mean, not like, you know, word for word, but I believe in like a certain conception of existentialism. There are areas where I might take certain issue. How can I explain all this universe if there is no God? I mean, the Big Bang, right? I mean, it just like was coincidence. I mean, just going by the current, like, can I convince you that there's no God? I mean, like, probably not. I mean, if you're like a staunch believer in God, then there's probably no way to convince you not to believe in God. There's one of the classic arguments, right, which is just like God is supposed to be an omnipotent being. God is supposed to be an omnipotent being, which is like is supposed to be everywhere, I think. Yeah, like like God has omnipotence, which is all powerful. He's omnibenevolent, which is all good, and he's omniscious, which is all knowing. So he's all powerful, all good, and all knowing, right? If God was all good, yeah. Omnipotent is like all powerful everywhere. Omniscient is like all knowing, and omnibenevolent is all good, right? If God is omnibenevolent, then why is there so much evil in the world? Right? If God is all good, why did God create humans who would destroy the earth? Why would God create humans who would grape and girder, you know? He's a wapist and a wubba. You know, why would that's Life of Brian. Little quote. You know, why would God do that if you were an omnibenevolent being, you know? I don't know. I think that's like a legitimate question. Dude, you're not supposed to give the answer. You know, I'm trying to make people think, you know, but yeah, that is the traditional answer, that like the best thing that God could have done was give us free will. I think there are like I think really the reason I don't believe in God is because there's no like empirical evidence for God's existence, right? Like I'm not going to believe something that nothing shows like indicates me is there, right? I want some sort of evidence, some sort of like indication, right? I mean, no, you're fine. It's kind of funny. It's like, but you hit the nail on the head with that, and it's the problem of evil, and the classic response is free will. But yeah, I mean, I think like for me, there's no like evidence for God's existence, right? So there's nothing compelling me to believe it. I guess I would usually say like I'm an agnostic, because like if there is evidence that presents it, I wouldn't like, you know. But so far, I just like there's been no defeaters to my view, you know. So I'm ostensibly like atheist. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, so that's basically why I don't really believe in God, I guess. Um, that God, what? Not giving us evidence so that he can test us if we believe or not? Like, no, because I think like a rational God would would not be like playing, especially an omnibenevolent God, right? He wouldn't be like playing games with humans. He wouldn't be like, oh, like you have to be someone who's like kind of like doesn't decide based on like empirical evidence. You have to be someone who just like, as William James said it, like wills to believe, you know, who chooses to believe. And that's not me. I'm yeah, but at least for me, it's like I don't think like yeah, I think you can like add like any what ifs, but at a point they just become like arbitrary and they're what's called like ad hoc hypotheses, which are basically just like additional like hypotheses added to your initial one in order to make your initial one work. So it's like, oh, well, God exists. Oh, but here's why God doesn't exist. Oh, but don't you believe that God's testing us? Like they're kind of just like you can continuously add these like arbitrary additions such that like not that like I have a problem with people who believe in God. Um so I can't really talk about love, but I can talk about beliefs, right? Yeah, love is an interesting thing. I think it's kind of just like a it's a property between two things. Two things have love towards each other. I think it's a property. That's all I can say. I'm not super knowledgeable about that stuff, but I can respond to Gom's comment. So you believe that everything we believe should be based on evidence, but the mind isn't based on evidence. But wouldn't you say that the mind um, is like our ability to think, like I think therefore I am, that is evidence? And in that same vein, you're bringing up Descartes, right? And Descartes did believe in God, right? But Descartes' whole argument was circular. I mean that's basically the biggest issue, right? It was basically like, oh, like I think therefore I am. How do I know that's true? Oh, it's because I have a clear and distinct perception. How do I know my clear and distinct perceptions are accurate? Oh, it's because God exists. You know, Descartes studied a lot, but then there are more like, at least in the modern philosophical canon, where pretty much every person has read Descartes, most of them reject, God's existence. There's a strong push for atheism because of the lack of justification for God, right? And I think justification comes from, like, we're justified in our beliefs when the beliefs were formed from what I would say to be a reliable belief forming process, right? And those processes can look like deduction, induction, so like reasoning, empirical observations. Yeah, I agree with that. The truth does not care for your feelings, 100%. But those reliable processes are like observations, um, like sense perception, arguably testimony, but I think testimony can be reducible probably into the other lists. But basically, we know something's justified, and I think like a belief in God would not come from a usually reliable belief. I mean, I think it could. I think people could be justified in believing in God if like they consider like parent testimony a reliable belief forming process, because like and their parents told them to believe in God. But also I think that like nothing in our like deduction or our senses tell us that God exists. So there's no like belief in God that is created from a reliable belief forming process. If you guys want a really interesting paper that I think that you guys might enjoy, that talks about kind of believing in God, and this is actually a paper that's for believing in God. There's this I mentioned it earlier, The Will to Believe. Well, I guess it's a whole book, but so there's one specific paper that I think is maybe like humans do try to create a necessary being. I actually talk about this in this paper, where like Sartre is talking about how, it's the wrong paper. The essential thing is contingency. This is in Nausea. This is a quote from Nausea, the book. I mean that one cannot define existence as necessity. To exist is simply to be there. Those who exist let themselves be encountered, but you can never deduce anything from them. I believe there are people who have understood this, only they try to overcome this contingency, this like lack of necessity, by inventing a necessary cause of being. So like I think people do try to create, you know, a god. They try to create necessity. They try to like invent meaning. They try to like come to terms with the lack of meaning in the world by like saying, oh, there was meaning, there was a god, right? But I think the problem with that arises in the fact that, like, one, the belief was not formed by a reliable process. It was simply just like made up in order to like avoid other issues. And two, like it's not based on like, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just not formed from a reliable process, and it seems like it's just like trying to overcome like used to explain things that can't be explained, right? Instead of assuming that like, oh, they can be explained, we just need to explain this and that first, or like I just maybe don't have enough knowledge to explain this thing. And so it's kind of used as almost like a scapegoat for like blank areas of knowledge, I guess. That's my view. How do I feel about myself? I mean, fine. You know, I like, you know, I'm not like a guilty person like maybe the Catholic would be, you know, Catholic guilt or something, but I'm a happy person, you know. I'm able to, I mean, I think I have sadness in my life, but I don't think it's a result of my atheism at all. It's like a post, you know, I think it's kind of unrelated. I think, you know, because I still like interact with religion, you know, I'm Jewish and I'm still like, and I still practice Judaism. I'm like, I call myself an agnostic Jew, right? So I, you know, I go to services, I, you know, celebrate Passover, I have Shabbos dinner, you know, I fast on fast days and stuff like that. But I do it more for culture. So I still have like the culture aspect and community aspect of religion. I just don't really believe that like a lot of the stuff that the Bible is saying is true, because I don't, you know, it doesn't seem to be backed by evidence, right? And maybe that's the empiricist in me, but yeah, that's basically the general idea. Yeah, ENTP, you know, Leo, so I'm just like arguing with everyone all the time. Yeah, I mean, I'm Jewish, but one of my roommates is Hindi, um, and you know I've talked to him about what Hinduism is, and I mean I would not say I've like gone too much into religion, because just studying religion in general has never been super like an area of like great interest for me, but definitely like I've looked at other religions and compared them. I definitely think like what from my roommate has taught me about like Hinduism, it's definitely probably like it's a lot different, and it's probably more interesting too. And I think stuff like Buddhism or Taoism can also be very interesting. One of my friends kind of like loves Taoism, so I think a lot of that stuff can be very interesting. I just like have never gotten into it. I'm kind of focused on like my own thing in kind of a different area right now. Yeah. Um. Uh. I thought like. I mean, I was in Rome. You know, I lived like a 15-minute walk from the Vatican, so like I learned a lot about Christianity. Definitely. Like I mean, I just know by living in America, like a Christian-dominated society, like I know about Christianity. Islam, I would say I know a lot less about, but I did learn a little bit about it in high school. I'm definitely much less educated on Islam than I am on Judaism or than I am on Christianity, and I'm even less educated on Christianity than I'm on Judaism. But I also think that like it's all the same God for the Abrahamic religions, right? So if like, yeah. No, it's all about like how you interpret this, like, random piece of, like, paper that was written, like, 4,000 years ago or whatever, or 2,000 years ago, and I also think that, like, a lot of the views in modern religion don't, like, coincide with a lot of the empirical observations we have in modern society, like evolution, the Big Bang. I used to be a lot worse. I used to be, like, way, like, I used to think it was, like, crazy to believe in God. I don't really think that anymore. I'm much more open to the idea of belief in God. I mean, at least, like, I understand why people believe it, and I think it can be good to believe in it, but yeah, I gotta go, so, yeah, it was nice talking to you guys. A fun little stream. Maybe I'll, like, work on it in the future, do some more philosophy. Yeah, no, the beliefs are different, but, for sure, the beliefs are different. It's all about, like, what you believe happened after, like, bullshit, but, alright, well, thanks for coming, guys. Yeah, I gotta dip. It's been real. I'll probably, maybe something this weekend. We'll see, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'll, thank you, man. Thank you. It was interesting talking with you guys. If you ever have any topics, like, next time I'm live, hit the subscribe button, whatever book. We could talk about it. I love talking philosophy. That's, like, my jam, but it's been real, guys. I'll see ya.